All right, good evening, everyone. It's 6:30. Welcome to the January 11th, 2021 Raytown Board of Education meeting. You would join me as we start by saying the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
Like allegiance,
to
flag,
the United
States
States
of America, and to the republic for which it
stands,
stands,
one
one
nation,
nation,
under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
Mr. President,
Yes.
I move that the board approve the January 11th, 2021 agenda.
Second.
Motion is second. All in favor of approval of the agenda, say aye.
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 All opposed,
Aye.
say no. All right. Report of board members. Any board member have anything they would like to share with us this evening?
I'll say I have spent a couple days this week up at the high school helping put the music library back together after the renovations, and it looks really good in there, and I'm sore. I'll just leave it at that. But it's been fun to see all the hard work put together.
Thank you. Anyone else?
No.
All right. We'll move right on to Dr. Markley and report of superintendent.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good evening, everyone. Just quickly go through a few items because we have two items at the end we'd like to spend more time on. Just a reminder that Board Recognition Week does not stop because of COVID, and that will be the 14th through the 20th, and we do this every year and recognize the board for the service that they provide the community. Legislative, or let me back up, 6.2, Cooperating School Districts Membership Meeting and Legislative Appreciation Meeting will be January the 28th. I highly recommend that you tune in at 5:30. You can hear the CSD lobbyists discuss the current bills that are pending in the legislature, which started last week. There are over 100 educational bills, which I would lean to in the legislative update. 100 education bills that are currently out there. As we know, not all of them will see the light of day, but always there will be some that'll be moving, and I'll be giving those to you in a future update through email. I've asked Dr. Huff to kind of speak to 6.8 tonight, assessment and recovery plan, and what our plans are moving forward as we continue to climb out of our pandemic issues. Dr. Huff, are you out there?
I am. I'm here.
Time is yours.
All right. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. It's good to see you all. And, obviously one of the things that's on our mind is how is this whole pandemic affecting our kids? And just a bit of trivia. We are creeping up on this, going on for a year now. And really it is obvious at this point that we will certainly be in the midst of at least some form of a different sort of instructional platform, instructional model well into or beyond the year marker. So this is a very unique time. And so we have had some very different methods of educating our students, and we recognize that we are not going to end this pandemic at a place where we normally would have ended had we been in regular school. I want to offer first off to really thank our teachers, our staff for doing such a fantastic job, an amazing job of providing what I believe is a top-notch form of education given the sort of circumstances that we're under. We've provided all sorts of different platforms for them to use, different software, and obviously they're teaching from their homes or teaching over the internet. Great job, staff. It has been quite amazing. Very proud of the kind of work that you put in and should be really commended for that. Thank the board for being very supportive also in the educational measures that we have going on right now. And our parents, obviously, who played more of a partnership in education than they ever have before. And I've talked to a few of you out there that are doing that from home right now, and you are to be commended. It is not easy. And we appreciate all the help that you've given. But even with that, this has been a struggle for our kids. And it's been a particular struggle for students that are, at risk anyway. Students that were struggling before, our students that are in poverty, our students, our minority students. This has been a real struggle. So students that were struggling before obviously are still struggling. The interesting part of it is that we're finding that our students that were successful before have made the transition to be able to be successful within this educational environment. We're seeing that across the country. So your A students have figured out the way to be able to be an A student. They played school well before, they're playing school well now. They've made that transition decently. But our students who are B and C students, slipping. Our students who are on the edge already, they may be struggling students now. And our students that struggled before are struggling even more now. So it is a very difficult time. I do believe that it is really impossible to be able to match in-person education in the virtual setting. There is going to be a gap. I also believe that that gap is greater the younger the student is, or the more that a student struggles in the educational setting. It's going to be a wider gap when they have to go to the virtual setting. And so obviously it would be nice to get our kids back in school, and that I know is a goal of ours to do as soon as we possibly can. So we have to acknowledge that we are certainly behind. And as you've probably heard, that is across the board, across the nation. Our students are behind. We anticipate that it's going to take at least 2 years for us to bring our students back to where we would hope that they would be. So I don't say that we are 2 years behind right now. We are not 2 years behind, but it is going to take us a couple of years to get caught back up to where we would think we should be at the moment. We are in the midst right now of assessing where our students are at. And I'll start with that because I think that's an important part of this assessment and recovery plan. And I don't know who's working the magic here, but if you'd scroll down to there's a chart at the bottom of this document. And there you go, the assessment plan. And so this is how we're going to determine where our students are at. And so a quick lesson in curriculum is that there are really two different kinds of tests. There's criterion reference tests and norm reference tests. Criterion reference tests are seeing how students are doing with the curriculum. And so I have the standard and I'm seeing how well the student does compared to the standard. We have criterion reference tests our students all through this time. And we continue to criterion reference test our students. And these are tests, as you look at this chart, tests that we give through things like RAS Plus, the curriculum common assessments, the assessments from Wonders. As you scroll down, you'll see assessments through STAR, for instance, in grade, okay, we're on that page, in grade 4, under the ELA, which is the third column to the right, you'll see in-person and virtual STAR testing. STAR testing is I'm sorry, I got ahead of myself there. Let's start with the criterion reference testing first. All of those others besides STAR were criterion reference tests. If you look on the first column under grade 4, you'll see GLA practice forms. That is a criterion reference test. That is a test that's taking a look at the Missouri standards, and it's giving them a map-like test environment. So that's going to be similar to what they're going to be testing in the spring when they go through and do the state tests. So we're going to continue to do those tests. Those don't really give us an idea, though, about where our students are at compared to where they would have been at last year at this time. So where's a third grader at? And also they don't give us an idea about where our students are at compared to other students around the country. So we do give, though, the STAR test. The STAR test is a norm reference test. A norm reference test compares the students to where other students are around the country. That's where you get things like percentile ranks that you may have be familiar with. And you need a norm reference test to do that. The STAR is the one norm reference test that we give. And we are in the midst of giving that right now. We're finishing up with our middle school students this week. And once we're done with all that, we're going to be able to run a very close analysis of where our students stand. A preliminary analysis, because we are done with our elementary students this time, a preliminary analysis does show that we did dip in our percentile rankings over what we would anticipate to have right now. So our percentile rankings last year, a little higher than they are right now. This is not a surprise. We knew that our students are having a little bit of a tough time in the virtual setting, as are all students in the virtual setting. And I will point out that, in that percentile rankings, we're being compared to students across the country. And even in Missouri, I would say that, I don't know, I want to say majority or not, but a lot of students have been in school the entire time this year. You get outside of Missouri, St. Louis, I'm sorry, Kansas City, St. Louis, Springfield, Jefferson City, Columbia, you know, those centers of population. Rural Missouri has been in school the whole time. And they've been, you know, high schoolers are there every day, all day. So that is the kind of students that we're being compared to as well as the students in the urban centers who may not have been in school at all for the last year. So at any rate, that's our assessment plan. And we are in the midst of doing that. It's going to give us a very robust idea about where our students stand. And it's going to give us an idea about what do we do with individual students and also what do we do programmatically to be able to make adjustments across the board. So if you'll scroll back up to, let's go up to where at the top of where it says recovery plan, which is on, oh, what would that be? About the third page. It's on the middle of the second page. So I've got bulleted list of the recovery plan here. These are different, just bulleted ideas about what we might do over the next year. Let me say right now, these are preliminary ideas that we need to flesh out with our staff, but they are ideas that are based in what we would typically do in a research setting. So one, increase the length of summer school. Really the first two are about summer school. Increasing the length of summer school, increase the number of people we invite to summer school, increase SLA, which is the Summer Learning Academy. And typically we have done Summer Learning Academy only in July and only with grades up through 5th grade. We could increase the number that we do in Summer Learning Academy to all the way through middle school, through 8th grade, and do it in June and July. What we would probably do is, especially in June, have a large summer school with everybody there, but then do a pull-out for students that are in SLA, much like we would for our students in that are struggling with math and reading during the regular school year with our title teachers, with our readings and math specialists. So that would give us the individual time with those students. We could increase the length of the school day by 30 minutes. Quite honestly, I think that one has a lot of issues with it and is not, you know, on the likely end of the scale, but that is certainly a possibility. We could increase the school day. I'll tell you right now that what I believe one of the biggest limitations is I believe that students have a limited, they have, like all of us do, a limited attention capacity. And eventually you get beyond what a student can handle in the length of a day. And we see that when we start keeping kids after school for tutoring, you start having a limited return. And so you have this, you know, you've heard the term law of diminishing returns. Students are certainly that way. And so that's one of the downsides of increasing the day. We're probably going to get more bang for our buck out of increasing the number of days we have students. So that's what we have in the first two bullet points. The fourth, considering retention for K2, research is pretty strongly against retention. This is a targeted retention plan though. And so research is really more about what happens with retention with older students. And it's actually really solid that retention is awful in most every setting. It actually hurts a student more than helping a student. So you have a greater chance of dropping out of school, of doing worse the second year in the retention year. But in K1-2, for students that don't attend and with partnership of the parent, it does have some likelihood of success. And so we will take a look at that. And actually, that is honestly the only time that we retain anyway. And so we might just expand the number of students that we would look at through retention in that scenario. After school tutoring, we've been doing that in the past with middle school and high school students. We would look at continuing that with late buses to take the students home and giving them a meal also while they're there. Returning math and reading specialists. We currently have 18 of our math and reading specialists that are teaching the regular school setting. That has allowed us to reduce class sizes. Math and reading specialists, you're champions right now because you are allowing us to have students in the elementary schools there every day. And it's because of you, as well as everybody else, obviously, but math and reading specialists, thank you very much for taking that on. We'd like to get them back into their regular job though next year. We have 20 of them. 2 of them are working as district coordinators right now. So we put them also back in that same capacity. We'd also like though to expand the number of math specialists that we have from 10 to 15. And we'd like to also bring back the IAs for the reading specialists, so the reading IAs. And so that is actually the one thing that would cost us a pretty good amount of money. And we estimate about $600,000 to do that. We would like to realign instruction, and we are already doing that. So second semester of this year, we are reassessing our standards. And so we already have our prioritized standards. It's impossible to teach everything the state has given us as standards, so we prioritize what the most important ones are. We need to reprioritize standards for second semester and realign our pacing guides, because we are finding that we are getting behind in some of our curricular areas. So right now, the district coordinators are getting with the teachers and getting a good idea about where we are falling behind. And where we're falling behind, we're going to reassess our pacing guides as we move forward and reassess our prioritized standards as we move forward. So we'll be doing that through the rest of the year. And then we'll also be doing that in the summer, so we can reassess what we're doing with our pacing guides and our prioritized standards for the year after and the year following that as well, because this is going to be an ongoing issue for a couple of years. We would like to look also at maybe having the students come for a full 174 days. If you remember, that is typically what the students would attend in the years past. We have reduced that to 169 because the state has allowed us to submit our ADA or submit our students' time in school based on the hours that they attend. And so they don't actually have to attend 174 days, but we still could have them come for those additional 5 days in this case. We do believe that would make a big difference. And so we look at potentially making next year 174 days for our students rather than 169. So I have gone through all that very quickly. Are there any questions about where we're at right now with that assessment and recovery plan?
Brian, will you be running this like through Rayteam or anything like that?
We will run it through a whole lot of folks. So right now, this is kind of the first step. And yes, we will definitely include, because some of those obviously could potentially even like for instance, the additional 30 minutes in the school day. It could have a contract issue along with it. So the components that touch the different groups that are involved, then yes, we will involve them in those particular components.
Also,
Dr. Huff.
oh, go
Yes,
ahead.
sir.
Go ahead, Mr. Toad.
Dr. Huff, the data point you gave us that the 2-year timeline that will take us to make up ground. Tell me how you derive that and whether, we should be, whether we should be concerned about it.
So this is typically what's out there in the literature right now, is they're anticipating that it's going to take school districts about 2 years to recover. I will say that even though it's in the literature, I would call it a wild guess. And it's going to be interesting to see how students react to some of these recovery initiatives that we have. It may take longer than that. And we may have some students that don't recover at all. And that's part of why it's so important for us to be considerate of the younger students, especially getting back in school, because the foundation of math and reading is being built in kindergarten, first and second grade right now. And every moment that they're in virtual, they are not receiving the level of education that they could potentially receive when they're in person. And that is, especially for our minority and our English language learners and our students in poverty, that gap only grows, and it grows quickly with those students in a setting that's not optimum for them.
And one follow-up point, I looked at your data, the attendance through December 2020, where you compare the percentage of attendance year to year. And there's maybe an impression in the public's eye that kids are just not tuning in. They may not be, they're at least clicking in, because if you look at the attendance data, the attendance of kids through December of this year is 2 to 4 points higher than last year. At Raytown South, it's 5 points higher. And that at least shows a certain degree of interest in what we're offering them. Now, I'd like to hear your point of view on that.
Yeah, without getting too technical, it's the way that it's calculated. And I will say that we are getting a good number of students that are attending. They're logging in, they are there. It is very hard to hold a student's attention. And you can imagine an adolescent, in adolescence, I don't know, maybe you were a much more attentive adolescent to their schoolwork. I know that I was somewhat irresponsible as an adolescent. And if I'm put at home by myself with all of the distractions that happen in a house, it's very difficult to keep all 30 of your adolescents who are on the lesson today focused on what you're doing. And you may have a student in middle school or high school that's looking right at you, and they appear to be very, very into your lesson, remarkably into your lesson. But what that student's actually doing is watching a YouTube video. Or they've got the Xbox on directly behind the monitor. The teachers could all tell you stories about what's actually going on with those students at their home. And they are, I'll say this in all seriousness, our teachers are champions of keeping our students engaged as much as possible. But I'm telling you, it is impossible with a number of our students because there's just too much fighting for their attention. There's too much fighting for our attention as we're sitting in this meeting, it's just hard.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Huff. Again, there's going to be a lot of things that have to fall in place for this plan to start materializing, most notably the cooperation at the state level with the calendar issues that we're going to be facing, and we're going to need their help because a lot of those are tied to state statute and state law. So, okay. Moving on down to 6.9, our ventilation update. I'm going to cue Melissa to bring in Sandy and start to bring in members of that team. But just quickly to recap, we've been working for several months now to try and get an idea of the potential risk we may have in our hallways because the buildings are older. They're not all ventilated like they would be to today's standards. So we asked the Hollis and Miller team to engage in a study of that and also engage some folks that not necessarily COVID experts, but they're certainly experts on the medical side along with ventilation side of things to come in and tell us what risk we may be facing and how to mitigate some of those risks. So Sandy, I'm going to turn that over to you to introduce the folks that are with you tonight.
Okay, good evening, board. It's wonderful to see you all tonight. I hope everyone's doing well. We're back again to talk about the ventilation assessment that we conducted over the last few months. I'm going to jump right in here. We have several other people who've joined tonight to answer questions and to review some of the items that were brought up last month. During the meeting last month, we reviewed the overall findings of the HVAC assessment, what we were able to uncover on existing facilities. And then this board asked that we bring in some experts who were able to review our assessment and help give guidance on what is existing currently in the buildings and what possible next steps could be. And so we did that. Following the meeting last month, we reached out to the Jackson County Health Department, the CDC, and other resources that were available to give guidance on COVID-19, ventilation, and other options and resources that are out there. And what was specifically asked of us was to find a COVID expert. Unfortunately, that does not exist in the environment that we're in right now. It's too new. It's too changing at this point to find someone who is literally a COVID expert. So what we did instead was contacted Children's Mercy Hospital and enlisted the help of Luke Guard and a Dr. Friedman, who are part of the environmental health division of Children's Mercy. And I'm going to let them take over and speak here in just a few minutes about their credentials and the background. Tonight, we don't have Dr. Friedman with us. She's actually out of town, but one of her associates that's part of her team is able to call in tonight and be able to give a perspective from a medical side. Any questions that you have, his name is Dr. Anderson. And I'm going to let Luke Guard speak more directly and answer your questions, but back up on that is Dr. Friedman and Luke were able to review our assessment and give a report, which we were able to share with this board over the weekend. If you haven't had a chance to read it, we'll go through it tonight. but it basically gives you some findings on your existing facilities, and then also reviews the recommendations that Hollis and Miller and Smith and Boucher have made to this board on either improvements or adjustments you can make to existing systems. So Luke, if you're on, I'll let you kind of take over and give a synopsis.
Sure. Good evening, everybody. My name is Luke Gard. I am an environmental hygienist at Children's Mercy Hospital, and I am our Safe and Healthy School Program Manager. I've been working in schools since about 2007, both proactively, where we're assessing buildings to try to basically catch issues or discover things going on that may be a problem before they really become problematic. We also do reactive type of things where somebody's having issues, health issues, or something else, a building issue, and we are there to respond to that and determine what may be going on and what those potential health impacts may be. We were tasked in this particular assignment. We were first contacted by Sandy at Hollis and Miller. And basically the initial contact was for us to evaluate particulates or find particulates in the corridors. And the school that was chosen was Westridge Elementary. I don't think you had kids in the middles and the high schools at that time. And we were looking for an occupied school. So the elementary schools became a good choice, and Westridge was the one that was settled on. I basically performed a fine particulate investigation in the corridors and the classrooms. And just what we found was that there was a subtle buildup in particulates throughout the day. And that would sort of coincide with some of the conditions that we basically observed while we were on site. The units were not on continuously in the 3 classrooms that we assessed. So that's basically a ventilation step that could be taken immediately in terms of increasing your run time or your on time and getting the systems off of on-demand setting and put them on the continuous fan setting. And then we did notice in a couple of rooms, it appeared that the filters were installed improperly in the units. They were changed on October 28th, so you guys are basically staying on top of the filter changes. At least in the 3 units that I observed, it looks like the filters were not installed properly. So after that initial report was generated, that went up to the board, and then I believe there were some questions from the board, not only involving our professional credentials or our areas of expertise, but also in regards to what Hollis and Miller had at that point recommended, both long-term and short-term. And so in terms of credentials, I've given you a little bit of my work background. I have a Bachelor of Science in Biology from the University of Kansas, and I do have probably more on-the-job credentials. So I'm a certified indoor environmental consultant. I am a certified microbial consultant, which is obviously what Corona would fall under. And I do have a building operator certification, which again is very helpful when you're trying to understand the interactions of the various systems and the operation of those systems in a building. In terms of Dr. Friedman, we have at the hospital, and I'll try to sum this up as quickly as possible, but we have at the hospital the connection to what is called the Pediatric Environmental Health Specialty Unit. There is one of these in each of the 10 EPA regions. We happen to be in Region 7, and the Mid-America PACU happens to be housed at Children's Mercy Hospital. The director, the medical director of that PACU program at the hospital is Dr. Friedman. And as Sandy pointed out, she did review the report and assisted in some of the guidance and recommendations that we made in this report. Unfortunately, she's not able to be with us tonight. Dr. Anderson, who is also part of this PACU network, again, he's going to be in one of our different regions. He has been involved in our COVID-19 task force that the PACU has basically been working on for the last 3 to 4 months since the onset of the pandemic. And as a group, we are trying to develop standards and guidelines, just like we're kind of discussing right now with you guys, as a matter of fact. So in a nutshell, I'll kind of leave it at that. I kind of want Dr. Anderson to introduce himself really quickly if he's on the line with us, and then I can kind of go through the rest of it from there. Dr. Anderson, are you with us?
Can you hear me now, Luke?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Hi. Hello, Mark Anderson. I'm a pediatrician. I'm 1,000 miles to your west in Region 8 and have been working with Elizabeth Friedman trying to develop some materials that would be useful to schools administrators as they encounter the sort of issues and questions that you guys are grappling with. As a general pediatrician, I see people in the clinic, kids who really are suffering, and I applaud your efforts to get the schools back open. Lots of anxiety, depression, overweight, hunger threatened kids, and schools are really the best place to put them. Again, I applaud your efforts. I've been a pediatrician for 25 years. I've been a member of this PACU group that Luke talked about really from its inception in 1998. And there are two agencies within the federal government, the EPA and the ATSDR, whose job it is really to focus on these issues. So each PACU typically has a pediatrician and then has other people like Luke to help us as we offer advice and hear concerns from the public and the providers that we serve.
Sandy, do you have anything, or do you want me to continue?
No, I think at this point, we'll just, do any board members have any comments or questions before we start to summarize the report? Okay, then we'll just go ahead and go through it. We won't need to read through this, point by point, but there are some key highlights in here that we do want to cover.
Okay, so on this first page, you guys are, I think, well aware of what ASHRAE's primary recommendations were as part of their pandemic guidance. And those are the three bullets that you're going to see up there at the top. The increasing the system on time to 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, if possible. The opening of the outside air dampers to 100%. And again, that's going to depend on those prevailing weather conditions. If we have extreme hot, extreme cold, or even more importantly, maybe extreme humidity, we really don't have the ability to open up those dampers as much as we would like because of the potential other environmental impacts that we may have on the building by doing so. And then the final thing is upgrading system filtration to a MERV 13 or higher if possible. And really most systems aren't going to allow for that, especially the age of the systems that we observed in your building. A MERV 13 would be about what you could probably do at the max. And in some cases you may be maybe limited to maybe even a MERV 10 filter just based on the system's ability to actually move air through that filter at those higher restrictions. So I summarized kind of this top part here as far as what we were called in to do as far as the fine particulates in the corridors. Now, as you scroll down to the bottom of page 1 and going into page 2, we're then kind of summarizing what your requests were from the board. And the two that we really had were kind of what is our expertise, and then is Hollis and Miller's recommendations, both short and long term, going to address your needs in those particular facilities. So this bottom paragraph here, I'm just summarizing that there isn't really a COVID expert, considering the fact that you may need environmental health or hygiene expertise, engineering, HVAC, medical guidance, virologists, toxicologists, epidemiologists. There's all sorts of things that are really going into this type of specialty, and there's really not one person that can fill that role. And so we really believe, not only with what we have at Children's Mercy, but combined with this network, this PACU network of really, really dedicated professionals with a wide breadth of expertise, we feel like we're bringing as much as we possibly can to the table. Now, as we transition down to the evaluation of the Hollis and Miller architect recommendations, basically, they had both long and short-term recommendations. And from what we reviewed, they do align well with what ASHRAE's guidance is and what they've provided during the pandemic. The one thing that I would say, and again, this is kind of the bottom of that first paragraph there, in looking at some of the reporting that Hollis and Miller did put together, they did show the installation of those systems between 2000 and 2005. So those systems are now maybe 15 to 20 years old. And again, we may be getting near the effective lifespan of those units. So replacement of the existing systems may be a good time. It's maybe a good time to consider that. Now, the primary focus of Hollis and Miller's report was really the lack of the ventilation in the corridors. That's what prompted this whole discussion. But they also, as part of those recommendations, were going to address things that could be done in the short and the long term. Some of those things could be portable air filters. Again, they went through opening doors and windows. They talked about challenges associated with that. So really what they settled on, in my opinion, in that narrative was really the possibility of moving towards something for the corridors in terms of a ventilation, because that was going to kind of minimize humidity issues and provide the ventilation in the hallways, which should reduce levels of any contaminant, including coronavirus or the SARS-CoV-2 virus. So as we're scrolling down, and again, we're now at the bottom of that page, right now, Children's Mercy and the PACU network as a health network, we are really leaning towards ASHRAE's primary recommendations, which are those three that I already went through above. We are avoiding making recommendations at this point of things like needlepoint bipolar ionizations, UV lighting, and some of those other technologies that may look like it's kind of a magic solution or a magic bullet for the kind of the issues that we're having right now, but we don't have enough research to really support that at this time. And right now, I think you guys have a lot of flexibility in those three ASHRAE recommendations initially. So I would recommend that you flush out or see what you can pursue along those lines before you even consider anything in terms of, like I said, that needlepoint bipolar ionization, various UV technologies, etc. One of the concerns also, and I'll just kind of go into it briefly, is if you look into the narrative associated with those devices, and again, this is why Children's Mercy and the PACU is typically not going to recommend for these types of devices, is they have shown to generate ozone when they are not functioning properly. So as those UV lights degrade, as some of those apparatus start to age, you actually start to produce ozone in the occupied spaces of the building, and that's a respiratory irritant and a respiratory hazard. The last thing I just wanted to talk, and now this is the next part of that page, one of the observations we also made was kind of sagging ceiling tiles. And those ceiling tiles are anywhere between probably 5 and again 20 years old, depending on what's been done in that room as far as renovations, etc. So they've certainly been up for a long enough time to absorb kind of ambient relative humidity. But I also know from experience, and I think when in speaking with some of the engineers that we've kind of talked to, I think we all kind of feel that those unit ventilators don't do the best job of controlling relative humidity. And so again, as you're maybe thinking of a long-term replacement, we'd maybe consider moving away from those unit ventilators, which should give you better control of relative humidity. And really with the new system, it's going to really empower your facility director. He's going to have a lot more flexibility in terms of scheduling the HVAC system on time, etc. So now when we come to the final recommendations here, basically what you guys had asked was whether or not the ventilation was actually going to address or make the hallways or any other space in that building safe from the SARS-CoV-2 virus. And there's really no way to really say that definitively. As I said earlier, I don't think you've exhausted all your ventilation options that are currently available to you. So I do think you have some flexibility within your system as it stands right now. But if you were going to go on to replace that, again, it's just going to give you guys a lot more flexibility and a lot more power to be able to kind of address those situations. So I also want to point out, and I think that this is important to say, in schools that are about the age and constructed in the era that at least Westridge was and some of the other elementaries were, it's very, very common to not see ventilation in the hallways. I'd say 2/3 to 3/4 of those older buildings, we do not see a form of ventilation in the hallway. So this is not uncommon to see, and your building just happens to be built when that era, when they weren't as concerned about putting the ventilation in that common space, those corridors and their hallways. And so really what I'd like to say is we support both the long and the short-term suggestions, whichever you guys decide to pursue, that Hollis Miller made. But I do want to point out that ventilation is not going to be a stopgap, or it's not going to be an extra layer of protection if we're not doing and focused on those primary behaviors, which are that routine hand washing, the masking during those school hours, and then trying to adhere to those social distancing recommendations as much as possible. The ventilation will help with that, but there's no way that it is going to be able to suddenly make a space safe if those primary things are not being done. And then the final comment that I really will make is there is no such thing. There is no standard or guideline about what is a safe level of COVID in the space. So really what we do is we focus on best practices. We try to set those ventilation systems up. We focus on those student behaviors and staff behaviors. And in combination, we should get a pretty substantial layer of risk mitigation that we've kind of built into everything because we're following so many different steps. We're covering so many different bases. And I think this last point is just really kind of the last paragraph here is just really summing up what the gentleman said before when he was just really talking about the educational process and those involved. It really does take a supportive network, and it really sounds like your school district is doing a good job of providing that support, and we just hope you continue to do so. I know this is a challenging time, both financially, staffing, all those other things, but that support network, in many cases, the school is the only support network that family or that child may have. So we hope you're able to continue to do that. And again, that may be the difference between a child being successful and unsuccessful. So I'm happy to answer any other questions. Other than that, I think that kind of summarizes what I'd like to say about the report. Sandy, if you think I missed anything, please chime in.
No, I don't think so. I think at this point, it would be great to open up to questions.
I have a question. So in regards to the short-term plan and the long-term, there's really no need for us to pursue the long-term. Is that correct?
The reason that I would say, again, the benefits to the long-term are twofold. First of all, you are going to address aging systems, and you may have to do that in the next 3, 5, 7 years anyway. So there may be some benefits there, and there are definitely going to be long-term benefits to improved ventilation and improved filtration in the building over time. Now, whether or not that weighs or justifies changing those units out right now, I can't really tell you that, but I think you would have long-term benefits if you did, again, go that long-term route. I think you'd see the benefits of that.
But not prior to the systems aging out.
That, again, that's up to you guys. That's based on what your budgets are and what your financial situation is and what decisions you'd like to make. The short-term solutions are fundamentally effective if they are done properly and then they are instituted properly. And again, I think the long-term solutions, it's just going to give you more flexibility, more of an ability to control your systems, et cetera. Now, whether you want to make that decision now, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years down the road, that's really up to you guys.
I mean, we only asked the question now because of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. So if those short-term would suffice, then I don't see, there's really no reason for us to do it outside of our systems aging out.
Mr. Britton,
Is that correct?
there's one piece to remember on that. As far as ASHRAE is concerned on the checklist, there's no requirements on upgrading your ventilation systems. It's all working with what is installed now. How can you better the system that you already have? There aren't requirements to say you have to come in and renovate. And that's pretty important to remember when you're referring to ASHRAE. They're really trying to work within the constraints of current existing systems without requiring budget increases in order to meet more standards.
And I hope I emphasize that, because you guys do, I feel, have a lot of latitude with your existing systems. I really do.
I'm not really, I'm not speaking in regards to requirements. I'm speaking just what we have right now. If we employed the short-term plans, that would suffice for meeting ASHRAE and everything else. We wouldn't have to implement any long-term plan in regards to that issue. The only issue that we have is maybe the system aging out. And then at that time, it might be better for us in regards to ventilation to use a newer system, correct? I'm just asking, is that correct?
Again, I don't know if I'm answering your question. I'm trying to, but it's really up to you guys. The short-term solutions will address the COVID concerns based on ASHRAE's guidance on basically the pandemic. So yes, that is true. In terms of, again, if you guys want to go to that long-term solution, I think you're going to have increased filtration efficiency. You're going to have more ventilation, more air being moved. And again, you would get the corridors as well. So how you proceed is kind of up to you. The short-term recommendations made by Hollis Miller will address your concerns.
Right. I guess I'm just asking that you said that both short-term and long-term will address the concerns. So that, I guess that's what so there's really, from my perspective, I'm thinking that the long-term plan is not necessarily needed at this time.
And again, that's up to you.
Thank you.
I've got a question for you, and also an observation. Sandy, I appreciate you and Travis working through this 6 months, and the credentials of the people who performed the work were spot on. I appreciate that. Luke, I love your credentials also, but I got to ask you a question. I wrote this down that there's a chance that you could have a really, really problematic situation. And that's, I don't know if that's in the science books or not, but it sounded like that was probably that is a big deal. So let me ask you, would it be a really, really problematic situation if we didn't do the short-term solutions? Would you suggest strongly that we do those and that we monitor and make certain that we've done them to someone's satisfaction?
Again, as Sandy pointed out, there are no requirements to do anything in terms of significant upgrades. There are really no requirements for you to do any of the short-term things either. Based on what we know about recommendations, health guidance that's established out there, I think you guys would benefit in theory by implementing the what we would call the short-term or the interim suggestions that Hollis Miller made.
So can I say this? Let me try to change what you said. Is it your professional opinion that we should do the short-term solutions? Is it your professional opinion?
What I would say is you would get that benefit. And if you guys have these concerns and you're reaching out to the professional experts at Hollis Miller, Children's Mercy, the PASU, to me, this means you have those concerns and you're aware of them. So right now you're already ahead of the curve. If, again, you are going to be bringing students back and we know that there's a lack of ventilation in those corridors, it would be theoretically, and I can't say there's a safe level of COVID, but it would be safer if you implemented those interim or short-term changes if you're going to bring students back into those buildings.
Sandy, do you have an opinion on that you'd like to share?
At this point, Mr. Chode, I would fall back on the ASHRAE standards, which is, they're recommending that you do what you can within your budget and your means to further enhance ventilation in your spaces. So if you're able to do that from an accessibility standpoint, then yes, change filters where we can and increase that filtration level as long as your systems can keep up with it. Increase ventilation in the classrooms, which will impact the corridors if possible.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I would recommend you do what you can within your budget means.
Okay, I think I understand. Thank you.
Mhm. Are there any other questions from board members?
All right, thank you, Sandy. Thank you, Luke.
Thank you all.
I just a question for Dr. Markley then. Where does this leave us then? What are the next steps?
Well, I think we're going to talk about that in the next one, the reopening plan of what we're going to do.
Okay.
And recommendations that we're going to make and bringing kids back here just shortly.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Ready to move on. Thanks again, Hollis and Miller. Okay. All right, RQS reopening plan. If you remember back in December, we shut down our elementary schools for the week prior to the holidays, just then primarily because not of a overwhelming case or cases of COVID, but an overwhelming case of quarantines and having people available to work. As we started to see the cases rise a little bit and we went through the holiday, the idea at that time was to bring everyone back that was currently in on the 20th of January to give ourselves some time to get away from the Christmas holiday and the also the New Year's holiday. We saw the cases after Thanksgiving began to decline after that 14-day window, like Jackson County said it probably would do. And then it started to climb again after the Christmas holiday, like Jackson County once again warned us that it might do as families began to get together. We're starting to see a decline again in the cases, not a steep decline, but it's starting to occur. So we will be recommending to the board tonight to bring back the following students to my list to make sure I'm clear. As we did in the beginning of the second quarter, our pre-K through 5 students. Now remember, we are at capacity limits with Jackson County still and to maintain social distancing. So those numbers would be the kids that were currently in session prior to the holiday season. Those are the students that are coming back. So remember, we're still under Jackson County occupancy limits. Our Northwood students would be coming back, our Herndon students coming back on their hybrid schedule. Our Success Academy elementary students coming back. All of our students that have IEPs that require them to be back in person. Those are the students that will be coming back starting Wednesday of next week. We have a long weekend coming back. We've got the information from Hollis and Miller about the things that we need to continue to do in our hallways and some of the improvements that we need to do as well. And we're also looking at, we know that educators are going to be in the 1B option of potential COVID vaccinations coming up. So we don't know how that's going to impact us just as of yet, but we know that information is coming soon. So that may impact our ability to come back at even stronger numbers when that occurs. So that's where we're at with our recommendations of bringing folks back. Might answer any questions anyone might have.
Dr. Markley, I don't know if this is where to ask it or not, but I noticed we have adjusted middle school and high school schedules. And so I've had some parents reach out to me concerned that like lunches are half hour off. So like if you have kids in multiple schools, you know, your lunches are going to be not all together. Why are we making that adjustment?
That's the first I've heard of that potential problem. Dr. Huff, have you heard that?
Beth, if you don't mind, say it again. I didn't quite follow what you're saying.
So the middle school, like the middle school and high school schedule specifically, how we're going to extend them into the afternoon. Are the lunches for those lined up at the same, like their breaks the same, so that families who have kids in multiple schools, you know, we're not making it more difficult on them?
Sure. I do know that we have moved the beginning of the day for high school earlier, but off the top of my head, I'm not going to remember what the lunch schedule is. However, I do believe that Andrea Mixon is on this call, and I bet she will remember off the top of her head.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I do have that information. Middle school lunch is from 12:15 to 12:45, and high school lunch is from 11:45 to 12:30. So there is about a 15-minute overlap there at the end. So if they did have students at both levels, that, you know, lunch could be prepared and then they could eat the last 15 minutes, they would be at the same time.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Markley, if I may, I just want to make sure that we're very clear on all the schools that we're also including 3 trails, new trails, in that it's really the exact same group that was in school when we shut down. It's the exact same group we bring back.
When I say pre-K, I mean including new trails and 3 trails.
Yep. Just making sure we're all very clear.
Right.
Are you including Herndon when you speak of it?
Yes, Herndon Vocational. And they're on a hybrid schedule, Mr. Burton, based on capacity limits.
Excuse me if I don't remember, but what is the reason for lumping them with the pre-K through 5?
Lumping Herndon?
Yes.
The Herndon vocational students?
Yes.
Well, just the very nature of the curriculum that they have over there, virtual does not satisfy the needs for what those kids are studying. So that's why we included them in, and on a limited basis where they could social distance. The hybrid.
It's also a unique learning environment too. Keep in mind that there's no passing time, there's no lunch. They're all in one room. The rooms are huge. It's a much different environment than a typical middle school or high school is.
And during that second quarter, when we brought the pre-K through 5 back, how many days did we actually have in person? How many days did we actually make it of instruction in person?
The exact number. Around not quite 30, I think. Give or take a day without really looking at the calendar.
I don't know if we made any type of assessment of, did we see any type of qualitative improvement during that time that we would, in that 30 days, that would make us put them ahead again of the high school?
You want to speak to that, Dr. Huff?
So I assume you're talking about, you're talking about for K-5, are we seeing an improvement in the educational process for them being in person rather than being virtual?
Not just in the process, but in the actual
in results.
In the results.
Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, I'm not going to be able to give you a hard number because we don't have a kind of a, in short language, a pre and a post test, to see, what was the amount of growth they had during the time prior to being in person and then during in person. They're very short periods of time. But just from observation, yes, students are, they're able to engage in the educational process far better, especially the younger students. And the younger is where like I mentioned earlier, the gap between the quality of instruction that you're able to give in person versus virtual is much larger the younger the student is.
Yeah. Well, I guess my concern is that I know that in person would be a better option, but I'm wondering about the back and forth in regards to quarantine and things like that. I'm wondering, is that something that's better than consistency either way?
So you're saying that
Or
is there,
consistency rather than going virtual?
so are you asking that if we kept them virtual, at least we're consistently virtual? Whereas if we bring them back, there's a potential that whole classes might be put on quarantine, and so they might be going virtual to in person, kind of back and forth.
Even in regards to the number of people and having the staff and just the stress of the whole thing.
I think we need to acknowledge that it is more difficult being in person. Our adults, it is more stressful for our adults, and it is hard. There is no question about that. But we also feel that it's important, and the benefits outweigh the costs there. And so you do have to do that analysis. You'd mentioned earlier as to why we would do elementary in front of, I think you said high school. And there's a few reasons. One is I'll say that the impact of virtual education on a younger student is greater. The other is because it's much more simple for us to put all the mitigation measures in place that we talked about earlier with an elementary student. You don't have, you have very small classes. We can, we were able to reduce the class size down to 70% of the state levels, state recommended levels. We don't have passing time. We can do lunch in a different way. You just have fewer people in a smaller space, in a space that's, that you can space kids out better. They're smaller bodies. All of it's easier for elementary, and it's more important for elementary. I do, though, feel that we should get our middle school and high school students back as soon as possible. And probably the biggest thing that's the biggest factor for that is we have to have our elementary buildings independently operating. And you kind of touched on that, that we need to see that we're not seeing a bunch of transition where we're having to have secondary folks come and help, and we have all these adults that are going out on quarantine. That has to settle a little bit before we can look at having the middle school and high school in. We're hoping that the vaccine will help with that.
So let me see if I get it right. In regards to the pre-K through 5, the benefit is greater than the cost or the risk of them having to go in a situation where they might be in quarantine and might be going back and forth in and out of virtual. That risk is less than the benefit that we'll receive from being in person.
So for the most part, an individual student has not seen that back and forth. So we do see classes that are going into quarantine and then back out of quarantine, but it's typically then different classes that have it happen again. Now, I will say that that's not across the board. We have a good example is Northwood. Northwood was a building that did see substantial disruption due to the quarantining. And that was very hard on that particular building. And so there were pockets where we did see that happening regularly. But for the most part, across the board, we even had entire buildings that really didn't have hardly any quarantining at all. And, so it was very unique to the building, across the district.
Okay. I think, do you have any idea, we had the 100 days, not the 100 days, 30 days. What was the average amount of in-person class that a student would have? Would most of our students be in person those 30 days?
And you know what, it would be, and maybe Dr. Shelton would have a set number on this, but I would say we could give an estimate. Mm-hmm. I don't know that we have that number set, and I'd hasten to want to throw out an estimate.
Yeah, we can get that information if you'd like that information. We just don't have it.
As to how many days or is a particular student might average out of that 30 days.
Sure. or even maybe how many students had to quarantine, and what was the average number of quarantine, average number of days that a student had to quarantine. But like I said, a good number of students didn't quarantine at all. A good number of adults in classes didn't quarantine at all. So.
Mr. President, I move to approve the RQS reopening plan as provided by Dr. Markley for elementary students to begin back, or all the buildings listed, including pre-K 5 and Northwood, Herndon Elementary, Success Academy, students on IEPs in person, to begin back on January 20th.
Dr. Markley, were you wanting a motion on that? We can do that, but that was already the plan, but did you want a motion on that?
No, I think it's good that the board can support that. And again, we didn't talk much about secondary and secondary. We said the last time we're looking at the third quarter unless things change. So it would be appropriate for the board to go ahead and approve that.
All right. Is there a second to Ms. Tittle's motion?
Did we have people that wanted to speak to this? Like,
Yes. Well, yes, we have 3 people that are going to speak, but I think they're going to speak to what you mentioned about the schedule, middle school and high school schedule issue.
okay. Second.
Is there any way we can hear what these people have to say before we do this?
Sure, that's fine with me. Any other questions for Dr. Markley on the report of superintendent? All right, we have presentations and recognitions, but Danielle, Nixon, if it's okay, we'll just go directly to public comment. We have 3 people, and Melissa Tebenkamp, if you could be ready, you have the names. I think Kristen Bell is the first one who requested to speak to the board this evening. See if we can bring Kristen in.
Hello.
Hi, Kristen. Thank you for joining. Go ahead. Thank you.
So I'm a student at Raytown South High School. I would like to speak about the new schedule that is being put in place. Me and a few other students made a petition in a survey. We got over 270 responses, basically saying that we do not want the new schedule to be put in place. And then we had students take a survey to see how they felt about online school in general. And if you guys would let me, I would like to share that with you all, if that's fine. Okay, so one of the questions, I'm going to read to you every single submission, but one of the questions was, how would you rate your current overall virtual learning experience? And one of the children said, I think that the way we put it together is good, but altering it constantly is changing the learning environment for students. And I feel like virtual, as of now, tends to help only the students at the average level of education. I guess you could say students that are advanced are not able to get the challenge that they need to know most of the material. So they get bored and do assignments and have no motivation, while the students that are struggling and need the extra help they usually get in school aren't able to get help, and results in usually failing classes and unneeded stress. Personally, I feel like the way that our schedule is right now is fine. I think that there could be different alterations, but making school longer and starting earlier is only going to send more people away, because as of right now, I'm in classes, there's barely anybody in there. And I feel as though that making it longer and extending it is just going to push more people away. It's not going to get people to come in. It's not going to increase grades. It's just going to push more people away. As of right now, your students are depressed. They are going through it emotionally, mentally, physically, spiritually, and all. And making this schedule change so abruptly in the middle of the year is very tone deaf to a lot of student situations and teachers too. I spoke to some teachers and they did not like it either. I feel, and a lot of other people feel, that this new schedule change is going to do nothing but make students more sad, more depressed, and not want to go to school at all. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Kristen. Appreciate that. Holly Crail. Hi, Holly.
Hi. All right. Good evening. I first want to thank you all for allowing me to have a chance to speak this evening. I have taught at Little Blue for the last 9 years. I would have to say Raytown takes pride in educating our students and doing what's best for our overall community. This is one reason why I felt compelled to speak tonight. In the 2021 school year, I was supposed to be a title math teacher, but was moved to be a 4th grade teacher when the district decided to come back in person on October 26th. I did this with no complaint because I knew it was best for our students. I believe parents wanted their kids to be in person and receive high quality instruction. I have enjoyed being in person with my students and giving them the support they need. After research and conversation with colleagues, I have compiled a few reasons why we should go back to school on January 20th. On the American Academy of Pediatrics website, they have stated, "We recognize that children learn best when physically present in the classroom, but children get much more than academics at school. They also learn social and emotional skills at school, get healthy meals and exercise, mental health support, and other services that cannot be easily replicated online." All of these points are true when you look at the Raytown School District. We provide our students with support to meet with adults if they need more emotional support. We know as adults it's a lot easier and more personable to share our thoughts with someone in person versus online. We are able to allow students to meet with their specials teachers, SPED teacher, counselor, and countless other caring adults. Our students are physically active during recess or PE. Most teachers take their students outside during recess. A recent article indicated that 120 health, science, and medical experts from the UK, USA, and Europe are stating there is clear evidence that vitamin D reduces COVID-19 infections, hospitalizations, and deaths. If we can get children to attend in person, they will have the opportunity to increase their exposure to vitamin D during recess and PE. Our district's free and reduced lunch statistics for the 18-19 school year were 61.78% as stated on the DESE website. Our students receive 3 meals through the school, but are not receiving those when they are at home. Lack of nutrition and access to meals can also contribute to increased risk of illness. I had at least 10 of my 13 students say they were disappointed about virtual learning in December. They wanted to see their friends, have lunch, recess, and enjoy learning with their peers. Most teachers who are teaching in person feel the same way. Children's Mercy has tested 42,283 patients since March 2020, and 3,108 have tested positive. That's only 7% of children that have tested positive this past year. That is a very low percentage if you look at the overall picture. Elementary schools are following all protocols that have been asked from the CDC to help keep our students to continue in-person learning. If you take one idea from my speech this evening, please know that we should return to school in person on January 20th. The numbers haven't gone up from children being in school, and we haven't seen outbreaks at school. What we are doing is working. Children's mental, physical, education, and social health depend on it. Thank you.
Thank you, Holly. Appreciate that. Brianna Bonner.
Hi, can everyone hear me?
Hi there, Brianna. Yes, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi. Essentially, I'm just going to be talking about the new schedule that's enacted and why this would be a terrible idea to pass it. So starting now. A few weeks ago, the Raytown School District Board voted to enact a new school bell for the second semester. These changes included starting first hour at 7:30 a.m. and finishing seventh hour at 1:45 p.m., with each class being roughly 1 hour and 15 minutes long. While on paper, this plan might appear like it works. In fact, it is likely to decrease student attendance, therefore dropping test scores and students' mental health. The first disadvantage of the new school bell system is student mental health. Simply put, the 2020-2021 school year has taken a toll on every single student's mental health nationwide. The lack of classmates, stress of a new school system, and constant turbulent times have created conditions for depression and isolation. We put up a survey, and 258 students agree with their mental health and grades are worse off. The results speak plainly. Students are not flourishing under the current climate. Test scores are merely a symptom of a larger problem. It is the student attendance that will suffer. Most students do not attend their class, and enacting an earlier school bell or making them stay online longer will make this all the more prevalent. Attendance has drastically dropped since September, and a new school bell system will continue this. District test scores will tank further if this bell schedule is enacted. The advantage of extra tutorial time and the claim that it will make students more likely to attend tutorial time and ask for help does not hold up. Students will simply leave after the 45-minute instruction or skip class altogether. One Raytown student said, "I'm constantly anxious that I'm missing something for one of my teachers, or I'm always worried that just one bad grade or even one decent grade will drop my grade. I work hard and sometimes have to stay up late. Lack of social interaction, sleep, and overwhelming anxiety of many school-related things makes terrible combination in students. We need time to sleep and work, and if we work better, we're going to work when we can get the most done. I highly encourage the district to let students wake up later and give less work and pressure before people begin to snap." Another said, "Sometimes when I wake up in the morning, I just really feel like quitting, just not going to any Zooms or doing any of my work. Maybe actually enjoying my day for once without the weight of 14 due assignments looming over my shoulders. But then I remember if I don't, I will fail and not make it into college. Then I slump out of bed 2 minutes before class starts and the cycle continues. Never felt like that so frequently until I started virtual learning. My mental health has gone down. I feel not as happy anymore. All we do is stare at a screen, and every time my teachers try and make it as fun as possible, but sometimes it just doesn't work. These students are not alone. Over 270 students and teachers from Raytown South and Raytown South High School signed a petition this week alone to keep the 11:45 a.m. bell schedule. Please listen to these students and revert to the original schedule. This will be better for students, the teachers, and ultimately the district. What I want to say is that if you don't take away anything from this speech, understand that students are suffering. Student mental health is drastically decreasing. If you enact this new schedule, you will see a drop in attendance. I go to advisory every single day, and I only see 3 kids in there. I go to my math class. I only see maybe 12 kids in there. Attendance has drastically dropped since the first day of school. And if you enact this schedule, it will continue to drop. Thank you, and please consider that.
Thank you, Brianna. It's great to hear from our students. We don't normally ask and answer questions of people who are speaking to the board, but I will just say that I know Dr. Huff and Dr. Mixon are still looking at these issues and the questions you've brought up, so continue to address those. And Brianna, I will just ask you one question. What did you guys do with the petition that you say that you had?
What did we do with it? Like,
Yes.
you
Did
want
give
to
it?
see it?
Yes. Yeah, who did you give it to?
No, I don't think, I'm not the one in charge of the petition. Christian Bell, she's still on the panel. She was in charge of it. But we can easily send it to the school board or wherever you need us to put it.
Yeah, sure. That would be great. All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate everyone's
Thank you.
speaking to the board this evening. All right. We'll jump back now and address the motion by Ms. Tittle to accept the recommendation of Dr. Markley as far as bringing those students back on January 20th. And there was a second.
Mr. Moore, I have a question.
Yes.
So, Dr. Markley, so if we start having issues, increased COVID testings for positive, what is another plan that we will move into where we'll go back to virtual altogether again?
If it turns out that we cannot, the only reason we came back to virtual the last time is because we just did not have the staff to maintain the schedule in the elementary.
So we do now?
That would be what we would have to do. We hope that doesn't happen. We hope moving into the different vaccines and et cetera, that maybe that could help a little bit, and we'll see, but we've got to get started, and that's where we go, Ms. Salisbury.
Thank you.
Did anybody else have any questions before we vote on that motion? All right, Ms. Tittle,
Yes.
Ms. Plank,
Yes.
myself, yes. Mr. Toady,
Yes.
Mr. Burden,
No.
Ms. Salisbury,
I'm going to say no.
Mr. Landers.
Yes.
All right. All right, the motion carries. All right, I think we said there was no other questions for Dr. Markley on his presentation. All right, now we'll have presentations and recognitions. Danielle Nixon, thank you for joining us.
Good evening. I'm going to go over Did You Know? So we have curbside meal service resumed after winter break. It's offered Monday through Friday, 11 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. at our secondary locations, the 3 middle schools, Ray Central, Ray Middle, Ray South Middle, and the 2 high schools, Raytown High and Raytown South High School. There will not be curbside meal service available on Monday, January 18th or on Tuesday, January 19th. We have a Robinson Elementary teacher who received a special recognition from an author, Glennon Doyle. She was nominated by a parent for her grace, kindness, and the caring that she shows to the students and families, and for her willingness to help students be the best they can. So the second grade teacher, Jen Skinner, received a copy of Doyle's latest book and a Starbucks gift card, and she was one of only 50 teachers selected from around the country to receive this recognition. Prior to winter break, we had some student artwork showcased from 2 students at Raytown High School, and continue to encourage families to submit artwork, and we're reaching out to art teachers as well to receive artwork so we can share it through our social media platforms while we are away and in virtual learning. Saturday, January 9th was Full Resource Officer Appreciation Day. And so we just want to take the time to thank our school resource officers for all that they do, and to support our students and staff and the community that they serve. And we're thankful to have resource officers that get involved with their school community and go above and beyond. And then last one, Did You Know? Our schools from around the district have been getting creative with their school spirit days. And most recently, Fleet Ridge Elementary students celebrated National Bobblehead Day. And there's a cute photo there of some students with their bobbleheads. And that's what we have for Did You Know?
Thank you, Ms. Nixon. Appreciate that. All right, Finance Committee report. Dr. Shelton, did you have anything you wanted to share with us on that, or does anyone have any questions for Dr. Shelton on the report?
Thank you, Mr. President. Yes, I would like to share a few items. First of all, one of the first items you'll see on the agenda is the October minutes. Those were reviewed and approved by the Finance Committee, and they're there for you to review. If you have any questions, please let me know. Also, you'll find on this agenda item the minutes from the December meeting. Those have not been reviewed or approved by the Finance Committee, but I would like to highlight a couple of items in those minutes. First and foremost, the auditor spoke and brought the audit from the 2020 fiscal year to the Finance Committee. Overall, the auditor presented an opinion that our financial records and reports are accurate And you can, basically the way she stated it is you can trust them. When you receive the financial records from the district on a weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annual basis, you can trust that those reports reflect the financial condition of the district. Also, for those who are watching, if you would like to see the audit, it is on this agenda item later. It's in the board agenda later in this meeting. Also, it can be found in the website, on the district website, but also there's a hard copy that's at the front desk here at the admin building. You're welcome to take a look at it, and we encourage you to see that and come by and take a look at it at any time. Melissa, I am going to share my screen here in just a second. The last item I'd like to share about the December meeting is the need for the board to set goals for the 2022 fiscal year. Right now, we're in the 2021 fiscal year, but we are beginning to prepare the budget for next year. One thing we do as we prepare that budget is we look at your goals. And I pose that question to the Finance Committee. I'm posing that question to the board as a whole. But what are the goals for the financial resources that we have in our district? Is it class sizes? Is it buildings? Do you want to reduce debt in our district? Do you want to address teacher pay? What is it that you want to do with the financial resources we have? Don't need an answer tonight, but I am posing that question to the board, and we'll come back at some point and ask the board what you want to do with the financial resources we have available to us so that we can build a budget that meets the goals that you have for our district. I do want to take a few minutes to address the financial condition of the district. And I'm going to label this presentation the good, the bad, and the ugly. So I'm going to start with the good. December was a good month for us, and we haven't had many good months this fiscal year. Matter of fact, over the last 6 years, can say that this is, if not the most challenging, it's the second most challenging fiscal year we've had. The month of December, though, was a pretty good month for us compared to last December. So December of 2020 compared to 2019, you can see that our overall revenues were up 1.3 million. And as a subsection of those overall revenues, the operating revenue was up 791,000, debt service was up 416,000, and capital revenue was up 106,000. So December was a good month for us in regards to revenue. Also, it was a good month for us in regards to expenditures. You can see that our overall expenditures were down 375,000. As a subsection of that, our operating expenditures were down about 90,000, and our capital expenditures were down 295,000. So you can see that December overall was a good month for us, and you can see that our balances reflect that. Our balances for the month of December were better this year than opposed to last year. If you want to go then to what I'm going to title the bad, I'm going to take a look at our quarterly report. So first quarter compared to second quarter. So first quarter of fiscal year 20 compared to first quarter of fiscal year 21. In regards to overall revenues, you can see that first quarter compared to first quarter, we are down almost $5.2 million in revenue. But if you look at second quarter from this fiscal year compared to last year, we're actually up $500,000. So between the two, second quarter obviously was better than first quarter, but first quarter was just so bad for our revenues, that it's difficult for us to overcome that. I'll address that here a little bit later on. In regards to expenditures, first quarter of last year compared to first quarter of this year, we've spent $755,000 less than last year. Second quarter this year compared to second quarter last year, we've spent $453,000 less. So on a positive note, comparing quarter to quarter. We are spending less both first quarter and second quarter this year compared to last year. I am going to go to the portion of the presentation that I call ugly, and that's looking at the year. So if you look at this fiscal year compared to last fiscal year to date, overall revenues are down $4.6 million. That almost entirely is in operating revenue. And operating revenue, we're down over $5 million. Expenditures, though, we are down 1.2 overall, and operating expenditures were down 2.4. You can see our balances this year, and they typically run negative this time of the year. Last year, our balance for the year was a negative 4.2 million. This year, though, it's a negative 7.6 million. And so the good is that December was a good month for us. The bad is that our first quarter was much worse than was so bad that our second quarter, even though better, is having a difficult time overcoming that. And the year itself has been very challenging for us. And as I mentioned at the beginning, it's one of the most challenging years we've had financially of the last 6. Where do we go from here? Hopefully the governor, who has withheld about $1.4 million from us, will release those funds to us. The state right now is sitting on a balance of about $900 million in their reserves. We're hoping that the governor will release the funds that are due to the district. In our case, that's about $1.4 million. Also, the federal stimulus that has recently approved, we don't know how that's going to impact us yet, but that has the opportunity to push more revenue into the district. And then lastly, our taxpayers. If our taxpayers really stepped up to the plate in December, paid their property taxes, and if January and early February are any indication of what happened in December, our property tax collection rate should be very strong. So where do we go from here? We need our revenues to pick up. We need to continue our trend for expenditures being below last year. And that will help us get through this fiscal year in a much better shape than what we started. Any questions from the board? Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shelton. If there are no questions, I'll entertain a motion to accept the Finance Committee report.
Mr. President, I move to accept the Finance Committee report as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor of the report as presented, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right. Again, thank you, Dr. Shelton. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mr. President, I move that the board approve the January 11th, 2021 consent agenda as presented.
Second.
There's a motion and a second. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. The consent agenda carries. Revised academic calendar. Is there a motion to approve the revised calendar?
Mr. President, I move that the board approve the 2020-2021 academic calendar changes as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Dr. Markley presented these at the last meeting. Dr. Markley, do you have any other changes?
Other comments other than answer any questions you may have?
I had a question.
Ms. Tittle?
I am muted. Am I muted?
Yes.
No.
You are muted.
There. Okay. Okay, just to be sure, February 11th and 12th were the original parent-teacher conference days, but we're keeping those as non-attendance days, correct?
Correct.
And is that, we want to keep those as non-attendance days in order to not change the calendar at this late date?
Correct.
Okay. And then our last day will be the at least right now, will be the 27th of May.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor of that motion, say aye.
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 Opposed, say no. All right. New business, financial statements, financial audit. Is there a motion to accept the 2020 financial audit as presented?
Mr. President, I move to accept the fiscal year 2020 financial audit as presented.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any other questions about the financial audit? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say no. All right. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Mr. President, I move that the board adjourn the regular Board of Education meeting at 8:05 p.m.
Second.
And there's a second. All in favor of the motion to adjourn, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this evening. Appreciate it, and we will see you all later. Thank you.